The Stripper in the Universe. Chapter 13. Like everyone else, I continue to be preoccupied with the meaning of life. I remember writing a poem about it, or rather, about a part of it, when I was a kid. The last phrase went something like, "But when His Majesty Death calls, each one must answer readily and pass within his walls." Much later, in a deep depression, as I smothered in dark, moist velvet, the subject of death lay heavily upon me, until the medications took effect. My receptor cells opened up, and the serotonin kicked in. I wonder why I became so preoccupied so early. Something else I can blame on my heredity and environment. I know now that, for me, death means being without Deborah. It was Herb Jeffries who opened a door to enlightenment for me, or at least held it ajar. Not long after we met and became friendly, during production of a Virginian episode I was directing, in which he was starring. He was fascinating, unlike anyone I'd ever known. Tall, lean, handsome, and very cool. Hip, we called it then. With dark, piercing eyes and cream-in coffee skin. His heritage was mixed, and he'd announce with good humor, "With all the trouble between blacks and whites, I sure am glad I'm beige." As I recall, he'd started out as a carnival performer. Later, he earned an international reputation as a singer, and had a hit recording with which he closely identified, Flamingo. He lived abroad for some time, owned and operated nightclubs in Paris, and back in the States became the first black cowboy star in B-westerns, which played in regional movie theaters. But what intrigued me most about Herb was his research for the meaning of life. Successful, comfortably fixed, bored, and restless with his waning career, he'd taken time off to search for his guru. In fact, he traveled to the Himalayas, where he spent a year or more in a monastery, listening to the monks and trying to learn from them. But eventually he came home to America, still unfulfilled, and almost as unresolved as ever. Time passed. He was driving along Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood one afternoon when he spotted a small Buddhist temple. On an impulse, he parked and went in. His guru was there. He knew it in an instant when he saw the slight, softly smiling monk coming towards him. His true education was about to begin. Now you must imagine Herb later, nursing a drink across from me in a dark and quiet Hollywood restaurant, showing me the power of his trained mind by raising a large blister on the back of his hand with the gentle pressure of an ordinary spoon, then willing the blister to shrink and disappear. It was quite amazing. Now imagine him leaning forward a little, lowering his voice, and describing the scene after he'd been studying with his guru for a year. They'd come to a place in their relationship where words were unnecessary. Their intimate silences were enough. And Herb again found himself, despite the teachings, still restless and impatient. Now imagine him telling this anecdote with a dead-on Indian accent of his guru, whom he called Guruji baby. Suddenly breaking their silence during one of their meetings, "You are restless, my son, and impatient." Herb reacted, only slightly convinced that by now the guru would read his mind, or at least gauge his moods. "Yes," Herb said. "And you long for a miracle," said the guru. "Something to prove some kind of truth to you." Herb grew more attentive, sensing the importance of the moment. "Yes," he replied. There was silence again. Then the guru picked up a small object from the table at his side and held it before them. "Suppose," he said in his lilting cadence, "suppose I hold this object in my hand, and take my hand away, and it stays in the air. Then would you believe?" "Yes," said Herb, beginning to tremble. "And if I held this table in the air, and I let go, and it stayed, then would you believe?" Herb was starting to sweat a little. "Yes." "Suppose I pick up the whole room, and held it, and let go, and it hung in the air by itself." "Oh, yes," Herb said, sweating and trembling. for he knew the guru could do it. At the table in the restaurant, I was starting to sweat and tremble too. Herb took a sip of his drink, resumed as the guru. Suppose I took the whole world and held it in my hands and let go, and it stayed suspended in the air. Then would you believe? The conclusion was self-evident. And that was the end of Herb's story, which I found somehow comforting. But not the end of our friendship, which lasted for some time. Once when we were working together, he brought his wife to Daly's, a viewing of a film shot of the previous day. The three of us sat alone together in the darkened screening room, enjoying ourselves enormously, making cracks about the obviously routine footage. His wife was pleasant-looking and friendly, a little plain, dowdy, I thought, in a well-worn belted raincoat. He'd introduced her as Temp. I discovered later, somewhat sheepishly, that her full name was Tempest Storm, and that she'd been an infamously buxom stripper. As a matter of fact, when I was in high school, busily cutting classes, I'm pretty sure I saw her perform at a Baltimore burlesque house after lying about my age to get in. Her billing was Tempest Storm and her treasure chest, and she could twirl her tassels in opposite directions. I have many reasons to remember Herb, and to think of him with warmth and affection. His marvelous anecdotes, of course, and my introduction to Tempest Storm, and how once, long ago, he gave my wife Deborah a pair of black pearls, just because he liked her. She's always treasured them.